She wanted my name off the deed. So I let her invite the appraiser, deep clean the house, and smirk like she'd already won. Then I opened the door and completely flipped the script on why he was there. The property deed looks a lot cleaner without your name on it. My daughter-in-law, Brooke, said as she slid a thick manila folder across the table. In that exact moment, it hit me. The last 3 years I'd spent putting my own life on hold to help them with this house meant absolutely nothing to her. We were sitting on the patio of the split-level home that I legally still owned. Half of. Brooke sipped her oat milk cappuccino, while my son, Logan, stared guiltily at his plate, completely silent. It was a beautiful, sunny Sunday morning, but the air between us instantly turned to ice. On the table lay a quitclaim deed, a document meant to sign away my rights to the property. Brooke claimed it was just to streamline things for an upcoming refinance on their home improvement loans. She kept checking her Apple Watch, glancing anxiously down the driveway. She was waiting for a property appraiser she had secretly hired to value the house for the bank. What she didn't know was that I was already 10 steps ahead of her. The appraiser wasn't going to show up today because I had called his office on Friday and canceled the appointment. As a primary co-owner on the title, I had every right to do so. I didn't feel angry. I just felt a profound, crystal-clear sense of detachment. Logan cleared his throat but refused to make eye contact. He had always taken the path of least resistance. Brooke gave me one of her trademark fake smiles, adding that a smaller apartment would be much more manageable for a woman my age anyway. I picked up the folder, slowly flipped through the pages, and set it aside without signing a thing. I finished my coffee, which had gone cold. There were no tears, no bitter outbursts. The era of quiet compromises was officially over. I stood up, smoothed down my dress, and looked Brooke dead in the eye. She was still listening for a car pulling up the driveway, but it remained completely silent. I offered a faint smile, turned around, and walked inside to grab my purse. I walked down to my first-floor living space and firmly shut the door behind me. It was a large, dual living setup, but over the years, the boundaries had completely blurred ever since my husband passed away. I had let Logan and Brooke take over the entire upper level. I was the one who put down the massive down payment for the renovations, paid for their high-end kitchen, and spent nearly every day cooking, cleaning, and babysitting my grandkids. My retirement savings had basically funded their comfortable lifestyle. That ended today, out on the patio. I could hear Brooke's frantic footsteps. She was pacing, trying to call the appraiser, only to get his voicemail over and over. A few minutes later, Logan knocked softly and stepped into my apartment. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, stammering some nonsense about tax write-offs and promising they would never actually kick me out. I just sat there and listened. When you stay completely silent, people eventually start talking themselves into a corner. He kept rambling, explaining that their utility bills and HVAC maintenance costs had skyrocketed, and that they desperately needed my equity to secure a better interest rate. I understand, I said calmly. Nothing more. No back-and-forth arguments. Logan looked visibly relieved, mistakenly taking my calmness for submission. He had no clue that, in my head, I was already logging into my online banking to cancel my automatic transfers. For the past 2 years, I had been depositing $1,500 every single month into their joint household account to cover expenses. Starting tomorrow. That money was staying right in my personal savings. I slid my planner into my purse. I had a few phone calls to make, not to lawyers, but to the people who actually handled the bills. As Logan left the room, I took a deep breath. The first boundary was set, and the real work would begin tomorrow while Brooke was at the office. Monday morning started like any other day for Brooke. She left 2 overflowing laundry baskets right outside my door and yelled out on her way out that the kids needed to be picked up from their after-school program at 4 o'clock. She took it for granted that my life revolved around her schedule, the moment her car pulled out of the driveway. I left the laundry baskets exactly where they were. I picked up the phone and called the kids' after-school care. I informed the director that I would no longer be on the pickup list effective immediately, and asked them to contact the parents directly for any logistics. Next, I drove down to the bank. It took less than 15 minutes to remove myself from their household account and revoke Logan's access to my personal funds. The teller looked a bit surprised, but processed the paperwork without a word. From there, I called the local HVAC and service contractors. Since the service contracts for the house's heating and cooling systems were in my name, I restructured them. I adjusted the accounts so that my accounts would only be billed for maintenance on my specific ground floor unit. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was curled up in my armchair with a book and a hot cup of tea. Right on cue, my phone started buzzing violently. It was Brooke. She was completely frantic because the after-school program had called her at work. She'd been forced to clock out early to go get the kids herself. "Why aren't you there?" she hissed through the receiver. "I have personal appointments today," I replied in a steady, quiet voice, and hung up. When she slammed the front door open an hour later, she stumbled right over the untouched laundry baskets sitting in the hallway. Her face was flushed with anger. But this was only the first wave of changes. Brooke demanded an explanation while Logan stood idly by, looking helpless. She accused me of being selfish and threw it in my face how much they relied on my help. I stayed seated on the sofa, put my book face down on my lap, and looked at them both. "I am 65 years old," I said evenly. "I've done my time. If you don't want my name on the deed, you shouldn't budget for my free labor either." Brooke scoffed, snapping back that they would just manage the house's finances entirely without me then. The next morning, I took a trip to Home Depot and bought a heavy-duty deadbolt for my apartment door. Up until now, there had been no real privacy. They would just walk into my space whenever they pleased, while they were both at work. I swapped out the locks myself. When Logan came downstairs that afternoon to grab the vacuum cleaner from my closet, his key wouldn't turn. He knocked. I opened the door just a few inches. "We need to start keeping our living spaces strictly separate," I explained. He stared at the shiny new deadbolt and swallowed hard. Over the next few days, I only cooked for one. The aroma of fresh pot roast drifted upstairs while Brooke, stressed out after long shifts, resorted to microwaving frozen dinners for the kids. She quickly realized that without my invisible hands running the background of their lives, the house was falling into absolute chaos. Trash cans were overflowing, mail was piling up, and the kids were cranky. Brooke tried her best to give me the silent treatment, but the financial strain was already hitting them. The first canceled automatic transfer had posted to their account, leaving them in the red. She had no idea I was already setting up a much bigger move. On Friday evening, Logan cornered me, asking to speak face to face. He looked utterly drained. The dark circles under his eyes made it obvious that his nights with Brooke had been filled with tense arguments. He asked me why I was suddenly being so cold. In response, I handed him a neatly typed, itemized spreadsheet covering the last 2 years. It listed every single dollar I'd chipped in for groceries, landscaping, and unexpected repair bills. The total amount was staggering. "You both wanted to make the house simpler without me," I said gently. "So, that's what we're doing. I am reducing my financial contributions to the bare legal minimum required of a co-owner." Logan stared at the bottom line, his face going pale. He had never realized just how much of their middle-class lifestyle was being subsidized by my bank account. He looked up and sheepishly admitted that Brooke had rescheduled the property appraiser for this coming Monday. She was planning to use a clause to claim I wasn't contributing to the property's upkeep, hoping to force an equity buyout or strip me of my title. I just nodded. "She's more than welcome to bring the appraiser," I said, with a pleasant smile. Logan looked completely thrown off by my lack of panic. He expected me to cry, argue, or threaten them. But earlier that morning, I had spent 2 hours on the phone with my lifelong friend, Clara. She owned a beautiful, accessible condo downtown that was currently sitting vacant because she had moved in with her partner. She had offered to lease it to me immediately. The signed rental agreement was already sitting securely in my purse. My mind was completely made up. But I wasn't going to leave this house on Brooke's terms. I still held the legal title to the property, and with it, the power to decide its fate. To everyone who spends time with quiet revenge, thank you. This channel was built for people who understand that life is rarely simple. The stories we share are about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, forgiveness, and the quiet strength that helps people move forward. We want to be transparent. AI tools may assist with parts of our creative workflow, but every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, fact-checked, and produced by our team before it reaches you. Because our YouTube monetization is currently unavailable, viewer support helps us continue creating these stories and keeping the channel active. If quiet revenge has ever brought you comfort, perspective, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Ko-fi https://kyo-fi.com/These Tree Family. PayPal https://www.paypal.com/paypalm/kanhuangmin. Your kindness helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for being part of this community. The weekend passed in a heavy, freezing silence. Brooke didn't even look my way when we crossed paths in the yard. She clearly thought she had won because I had stopped complaining and wasn't engaging in her drama. She spent hours deep cleaning and staging the upstairs level for the appraiser. Everything had to look pristine. She wanted the house to appraise at the highest possible value to prove to the bank that she and Logan could carry the mortgage on their own. I used that time to quietly pack away my most important documents, family heirlooms, and personal keepsakes into boxes. I did it late at night after their lights went out. It was amazing how little a person actually needed to be genuinely happy. As for the heavy, solid wood furniture my late husband and I had bought years ago, I decided to leave it right where it was. It technically counted as part of the property's furnished value, and it would make it incredibly difficult for Brooke to redecorate or repurpose the space since she didn't have the budget to buy her own furniture to replace it. On Sunday night, I saw Logan sitting alone at the kitchen island upstairs. He was staring at a stack of bills that had accumulated over the month. without my $1,500 cushion. Their monthly budget was pushed past its absolute limit. He looked up at me with a silent, desperate plea for help in his eyes. I simply turned around and walked back down to my room. Enabling them any further wasn't going to help anyone. They needed to learn how to carry the weight of their own choices. I set my alarm for 7 in the morning. Monday was going to change everything. Brooke thought she was cornering me, but she had no idea the trap was about to spring on her instead. On Monday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, a clean sedan pulled into the driveway. Brooke was already waiting on the porch. A triumphant, self-satisfied smirk on her face. She had even dressed up for the occasion. Logan stood a few paces behind her with his arms crossed, looking incredibly anxious. I unlocked my door and stepped outside, completely composed. The appraiser, a professional-looking older gentleman carrying a tablet, stepped out of his car and greeted us politely. "Mrs. Weber, Mr. Weber," he said, checking his digital files. Brooke immediately stepped forward to take control of the conversation. "Thank you for coming out so quickly. We need an official appraisal to buy out my mother-in-law's share of the property and remove her from the deed. Everything upstairs is ready for you to look at." The appraiser looked up from his tablet, a look of profound confusion crossing his face. He glanced at Brooke, then turned his attention directly to me. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but my work order from the agency says something completely different. I was told we are evaluating the property for an immediate, full market listing. I thought we were prepping the entire estate to be put up for public sale." Per our phone conversation on Friday, Brooke's smirk instantly vanished. Her face drained of color as she stared at the appraiser, then whipped her head around to look at me. What do you mean, sale?" "This house is not for sale," she yelled, her voice cracking under the sudden panic. I kept my hands folded neatly in front of me and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Since this house is legally split 50-50 between Logan and myself, and we can no longer reach a mutual agreement on its usage, I have exercised my right as a co-owner. I am not selling my half to you. I am forcing a partition sale of the entire property through a private real estate agency. The appraiser is here to determine the market value for potential buyers." Logan's jaw dropped. Brooke went entirely pale. Her carefully constructed plan crumbled to dust in a single second. Brooke immediately lost her composure. "You can't do this. We live here. This is our children's home." The appraiser, looking incredibly uncomfortable with the unfolding family drama, took a polite step back toward his car. I looked at her, completely unfazed by her outburst. "You wanted things to be simpler. Brooke, a clean sale is the simplest solution. Logan will get exactly half of the net equity, and I will take my half, with your portion of the funds. You two can easily find a nice townhouse within a budget you can actually afford on your own incomes." Logan put his face in his hands. He knew the local real estate market was booming. If I forced a sale, they stood no chance of buying me out. No bank in the city would approve them for a mortgage large enough to cover my half of the equity without my income tied to the application. Brooke was practically vibrating with rage, but because there was a professional witness standing right there, she forced herself to swallow her anger. "Look, we can talk about this," she stammered, her tone suddenly shifting into a desperate attempt at negotiation. "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied politely. "The appraisal is happening today. I gestured for the appraiser to follow me inside and led him through my ground floor apartment first. I showed him every single room, pointed out the custom renovations I had personally funded, and handed him a neat folder containing the original receipts. Logan and Brooke followed us from room to room like two ghosts. Every time Brooke tried to downplay an upgrade or dispute my investments, I simply laid another paper receipt on the table. I had documented every single cent. They realized, with sickening certainty, that they had been completely checked, braced in their own game. They thought an older woman would be an easy target. Now they were learning what happens when you underestimate someone who knows her worth. 2 hours later, the appraiser wrapped up his notes. He thanked us for our time and promised to email the official valuation report to my personal address within the week. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the suffocating silence in the house broke. Brooke wasn't yelling anymore. She was sitting at the kitchen island, quietly sobbing into her hands, while Logan just stood there, staring blankly at the floor. Reality had finally sunk in. They were going to lose the house unless they agreed to whatever terms I set. "What is it going to take?" Logan asked, his voice raw and hollow. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I sat down across from them. "I won't list the house on the market immediately," I said, my tone strictly business. "But I have one non-negotiable condition. You will sign a legal agreement giving me sole management rights over the property. Starting next month, you will pay me fair market rent for the upper level. No more free rides, no more unpaid babysitting, no more housework, and no more grocery money. If you miss a single payment, the house goes on Zillow the very next day." Brooke looked up, her eyes filled with resentment, but beneath it was the bitter realization that she had zero leverage. Without this house, they had nowhere to go, and renting a comparable place in this school district would cost them double. Logan nodded slowly. "Fine, we'll do it," he said quietly. Brooke opened her mouth to argue, but Logan firmly caught her by the arm, silencing her. He finally understood that his mother was the one holding all the cards. I stood up and pulled out the lease agreement I had drafted over the weekend. Both of them signed it with trembling hands. I took the document, slid it into my purse, and walked away. I had won not with screaming or tears, but through the quiet, unyielding power of financial reality. 3 weeks later, the transition was complete, though. It didn't happen quite the way Brooke had envisioned. I was the one who packed up and moved out. I moved into Clara's beautiful, sunlit condo downtown. The monthly rent checks that Logan and Brooke were now legally obligated to send me covered my new living expenses perfectly. As for my ground floor apartment back at the house, I leased it out to a lovely, quiet, retired couple who fell in love with the backyard garden. Now, Brooke had total strangers living right beneath her, and she had no choice but to mind her manners and adapt to their boundaries. On my first Sunday morning in my new place, I sat out on my balcony with a view of the city skyline. In front of me sat a steaming mug of black coffee and a fresh pastry from the bakery downstairs. The neighborhood was peaceful, and the morning air felt incredibly crisp and clean. There were no mountains of someone else's laundry waiting for me, and no frantic text messages demanding I bail them out of their own poor planning. For the first time in years, I felt a deep, overwhelming sense of peace. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. It was a text from Logan, asking if I was planning to come over for my grandson's upcoming birthday party. I typed out a brief, polite response. I'll mail his gift ahead of time. I actually have travel plans that weekend. Have fun. No bitter remarks. No guilt trips, just a firm, immovable boundary. I would see my grandchildren when I chose to. On my own schedule. Not as a convenience for their parents. I was rebuilding my life entirely on my own terms, free from everyone else's expectations. Brooke had been right about one thing. The house really did look a whole lot better without my name attached to their drama. But it looked even better reflecting on my own bank statement. As I enjoyed the beautiful, quiet luxury of my freedom, I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled at the morning sun. To everyone who spends time with quiet revenge, thank you. This channel was built for people who understand that life is rarely simple. The stories we share are about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, forgiveness, and the quiet strength that helps people move forward. We want to be transparent. AI tools may assist with parts of our creative workflow, but every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, fact-checked, and produced by our team before it reaches you. Because our YouTube monetization is currently unavailable, viewer support helps us continue creating these stories and keeping the channel active. If quiet revenge has ever brought you comfort, perspective, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/quiet-revenge-family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/thistry-family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/paypalmin/kanhuangmin. Your kindness helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for being part of this community.